The idea for this video came to me like prophecy arrives to an oracle. There I was, not a week ago, laying in my bed, drifting off to sleep when it hit me like a bolt of lightning from the kingdom of heaven. I jotted it down, and on the very next day, I got to work. That's right, today I'm talking about Conker's Bad Fur Day. I've just finished off a 40-ounce beer, and I'm nursing another one as I record. I've got a pizza in the oven, and if I don't finish this recording in time, that shit's gonna burn. Let's get this over with. Conker was introduced to the world at E3 1997 in his titular game Conker's Quest, a family-friendly 3D platformer in the vein of Banjo-Kazooie, another game by a separate team at development studio Rare, which debuted at the very same show. The game was in a pretty unfinished state, and apparently a lot of people on the show floor had trouble telling it apart from Banjo. Over the next few years, before his own game would be released, Conker would make a couple appearances. First in Diddy Kong Racing as a playable character, then at 1998's E3 with his game renamed to 12 Tales Conker 64. Behind the scenes, things weren't working out too well for the Conker team. Their ideas weren't gelling too well, and confidence in the project was waning as the game was doing very little to distinguish itself from the myriad of other 3D platformers coming out at the time. So at some point, they decided to scrap this 12 Tales shit and let their demons out to play. That's right. On June 8th, 1999, Rare released Conker's Pocket Adventure. Looks fucking fun, don't it? Then, 2 years later, they released a sequel, Conker's Bad Fur Day. Instead of the promised cutesy squirrel game where you collect nuts or whatever, we got a game where you down a bottle of scotch and piss everywhere. That's why I'm doing this, the drunken thing, if you didn't know. This game is M-rated and it has violence, gore, and innocent creatures are slain for the sake of comedy. The game got great reviews and accordingly sold pretty badly. There are a number of theories on why this happened. I'm not saying it's because Frogger the Great Quest came out the same year. Let's just cut to the chase and say that despite the poor sales, Conker has since found its place in the hearts and minds of gamers all around the globe. I myself have always been a bit curious about this game, so I took this opportunity to finally play and learn about it. I guess I have a bit of a disclaimer. I've never played a single game by Rare before this. No Banjo-Kazooie, no Donkey Kong, no fucking Battletoads, none of that. So if I praise or pan anything, and you think those criticisms are more fitting for another Rare title, after which this one's design is based, you're probably right. I'm also not playing the live and reloaded version because I don't like how it looks very much.
Out with it.
The story follows Conker, a red squirrel who's pissed drunk after a night out with his mates. And on the way home from the pub, he takes a wrong turn and ends up in the wrong somewhere. Seizing control, it's the player's job to help Conker get home and collect as much cash as he possibly can along the way. Along with the general edginess, the game enjoys frequent fourth wall breaks in a Looney Tunes sort of way, only it's adapted to the medium of a video game. Conker's always looking to the camera and saying some shit.
Balls of pasta, polished to the nth degree.
Oh no, a bourgeois big buzz spoiler. That's fine.
This style is exemplified in gameplay too by these context-sensitive buttons that appear throughout the game. When interacted with, Conker will pull something out of his back pocket that suits the situation at hand. A lot like how Bugs Bunny might pull out a stick of dynamite to fuck Elmer Fudd's face up. In a more serious game, these openly context-sensitive moments might spur arguments over game design because conventional wisdom usually posits that games shouldn't be constantly changing the rules like this. But since this game goes out of its way to make it a part of the general aesthetic, I think it works. This cartoon/game combination works very well to meld video gamey tropes like lives and health pickups into the cinematic side of the story. The first time you die, you get this cutscene where you meet the Grim Reaper, Greg, and he explains lives like this.
Apparently, squirrels can have have as many lives as they think they can get away with.
Oh, I see.
You may not be dead, but that doesn't mean you can't die. You just have a few more, shall we say, chances. Squirrels' tails. If you can get them, I'll give you an extra chance. Understand?
This is like what fucking Demon Souls did like 8 years later. I love it when games do shit like that. It's so cool. Anyways, the plot overall seems to be a stream of consciousness meant to loosely justify all the game's scenarios. Remember, Conker's main objective is just to find his way home from the bar, which I guess explains why he's exploring all of these areas. But because this game wants to delve into a bunch of subplots, he'll also accept a bunch of insane tasks with the promise of money. It gets a bit contrived in some parts. Like, here I'm rolling a ball of shit up a hill, like some kind of scatological Sisyphus, and I'm just thinking like, why does Conker think this will help him find his way home? It's not a big deal or anything, I just thought it was funny. This stream of consciousness style of storytelling isn't just a label I pulled out of my ass, by the way. Developers actually admit that they were basically writing the game as they made it. I'm actually not sure how orthodox that is in game development, but it's fine in my book, since game stories are best when they take after gameplay anyway. The spontaneity of this style seems to have made the game a lot more fun to work on according to its creators, because it meant that they were almost constantly working on fresh ideas.
You know we stick to the death of the game on top stage.
I guess I'll also mention the cutscenes featuring the game's main antagonist, if you can even call him that. It's this Panther King whose table is missing a leg, causing him to repeatedly spill his glass of milk. His Nazi weasel scientist friend proposes a solution. Acquire a squirrel that's just the right height to fill in for the leg and balance the table. A squirrel such as Conker. The thing about this Panther King is that he's barely an antagonist. His only relevance most of the time is that he appears in the game over screens. It's not like the enemies you fight throughout the game are his minions or something, they're just random dickheads who want to kill you. He does become important at the end of the game, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's talk about the visuals. The visuals have that N64 rare charm to them, and their games usually looked great for their time. There are a few reasons I've deduced for why this is. The art style is decidedly simple. Rendering a cartoon is always going to be easier than rendering something realistically, and the result is that the game's visuals aren't too far off from the concept art they're based on. For comparison, Rare also did a game adaptation of 1995's GoldenEye, and while that game is still revered to this day, they did in fact print Pierce Brosnan's face onto a shitty cardboard cutout. They also put a lot of emphasis on character animation, so your characters move with a vivacious, cartoony sort of appeal. Conker's model deserves special praise for how detailed and expressive it is. This tail of his was meticulously animated to move as fluidly as possible in accordance with player movement, and his face is able to portray so much more personality than basically any other character of the time, at least that I can think of. This is also at the very end of the N64's life, so the developers had a good bit of time to get accustomed to the nuances of 3D graphics. The main sign of this that I've noticed is the texture work. In a lot of other N64 games, the textures are just really plain. Like they'll have a grass texture or a stone texture, and they'll just apply those materials to the surfaces they're meant for, which works fine, but Conker's textures are much more impressive. Most textures seem specially painted for their objects, but even when you get the sense that they're using more generic textures, there's always care given to blend them together to make them look more natural with the environment. Something I think has aged really well about the N64 in general is the fact that developers didn't have access to full motion video when creating cutscenes, since the cartridges the games were printed on usually didn't have the real estate to store relatively large video files. Compare this to something like the PS1, which printed its games on CDs, meaning they could be magnitudes larger than those on the N64. Developers often flip-flopped between real-time rendered gameplay and pre-rendered cutscenes. I appreciate the fact that they were trying to make their games look as good as possible at the time, but every time they do this, they're essentially switching between art styles because of how dramatically different the fidelity between gameplay and cutscene is. So it's hard for some games to keep a consistent visual identity, and it also gives the impression that the gameplay is somehow less potent than the cutscene, since its lower fidelity makes it look lower tech. By not having the luxury of full motion video though, N64 games keep visual consistency, so you get a stronger sense that the conker you see in the cutscene is the same one you play as in the game. I can only imagine how a pre-rendered conker might have looked. Based on the cover art, I'm glad we didn't get too much of that. Overall, I think the intended comedy of seeing this game's sleaze and gore through a cartoony lens is only accentuated when layering a modern viewer's perspective of these crude graphics on top. I was genuinely shocked when I first saw this game in a Happy Tree Friends sort of way. It definitely leaves a strong impression. So yeah, I'm done talking about visuals. Let's talk about sound and music.
I am the great mighty Pooh, and I'm going to throw my shit at you. A huge supply of tish comes from my chocolate starfish. How about some scat, you little twat?
This game's soundtrack is pretty sweet. It's full of catchy tunes that manage to match the game's range in terms of all the different scenarios presented. Basically every tune on the track can be classified in a different genre from all the others, which, even as somebody who doesn't know much about music, I find that impressive. I think I did go a bit crazy after hearing the track Windy and Co. about 1,000 times while trying to figure out the Barnyard level. It's a good song, but it's a real earworm. After maybe an hour or so of hearing nothing but and hearing cartoon characters screaming at each other and seeing a rat explode into bloody chunks, I could feel my brain start to swell up. So, to be honest, I ended up turning the game volume down a bit and putting on some podcasts or whatever to keep me sane. I think it's just because this track is played in the hub area, and then the first world you're encouraged to enter has the same exact music, so that's a long chunk of time to continuously hear the same piece of music over and over again. And I think any song would get old in that time. In fairness, I'm kinda stupid, and it took me forever to figure this area out. But I do think the game would have done well to break things up. Maybe fade out and give me ambience every once in a while, or something. Moving on to more sound design territory, I was wondering how they managed to fit so many voice lines onto an N64 cartridge since, as I explained, storage was limited and audio could take up a lot of space. As it turns out, it was accomplished with a pinch of dark magic and a game cartridge whose storage space was increased to 64 megabytes, allowing Conker to become one of the largest games for the system in terms of file size. The voice acting is generally good, and I think it was a good inclusion for a comedy-oriented game like this. These jokes wouldn't work if you didn't have the comedic timing of a voiceover. I also want to highlight that 99 of the voices were done by one guy, so that's pretty impressive. The biggest standout moment for sound design for me was in this World War II level. I'll just play some clips for you to give a sense of how well the atmosphere is built. We'll play the clip. Fucking bullets and shit flying and fucking... Speaking of this level, I think it's time to air some grievances. Guys, I'm gonna be honest. I kinda fucking hated playing this game. At the beginning, I described this game as a platformer, but I don't think that's the most accurate description of what it is. Sure, your core gameplay loop is platforming, but if I had to give an estimate, I'd say only about 40% of it is actually about platforming, and that'd be generous. The other 60% makes me angry, and that's red in the face, pissing angry. God damn, did this game piss me off. God, look at this shit! I'll kill you, Conker! I'll fucking kill you! While playing, I said multiple times out loud that I hate this game. In fairness, I was in a dark place at the time. I don't hate this game. I just think there were a few fatal flaws that made these sections very unfun. There are a lot of moments in this game where you have to aim something, and they are rarely good moments. Whenever you move the camera, there seems to be an added ease out effect to make the camera movement smoother, but this hinders precision and can make it feel like the camera is operating on ice physics almost. In addition, the aim is vertically inverted, meaning in order to tilt your aim upwards, you tilt down on the joystick and vice versa. Sort of like you're controlling a plane. There's a reason why only crazy people control games like this. It's just so unintuitive that I found myself basically unlearning it whenever I switched back to normal controls. You just never get used to it. So, there's this very traumatizing section where you're asked to run and gun through corridors, and the transition between platforming and shooting is confusing since the camera and movement controls swap places on the controller. Oh my god. I'll admit now that I'm not playing on the original hardware. I'm playing through Project 64. My controller, a third-party Xbone gamepad, doesn't have the same dimensions to an N64's controller. So I'll give the game a bit of slack here and assume that my issues with aiming were due in some part to my controller not being calibrated correctly to their game's design. I'll also give it to them that Halo hadn't come out yet as of this game's release, so there was no universal blueprint for how console shooters should control. I can see how they might have thought this was acceptable in their day. Let's talk a bit about the game's swimming controls. While I found them to be a bit obnoxious, I never had too much trouble with them. The camera swings around too fast, it's hard to gauge distance between yourself and the blades, and the air meter being Conker's face is funny, but it doesn't give as good of feedback as the meters in other games since you don't get a countdown or a bar that can be easily referenced at a glance. You're meant to read the expression on Conker's face while also navigating the area, so it's hard to be confident on how long you could be submerged. Also, side note, this is important. For the first couple hours of the game, Conker can't dive underwater like this. It's only after he hits a context-sensitive button and pulls out a bottle of confidence pills that he's able to do it. That's quite cheeky, but why does Conker choose the shit water area to be the first place he can dive in? Then afterward, he grimaces at the thought of touching shit and even puts on a gas mask to filter the stench of the area. Conker, don't pretend like you're above this. I've seen what you're capable of. The game's platforming has a few problems too. Depth isn't always properly conveyed. I wish they would have done the Mario 64 thing where your guy has a little shadow below him so you can see what surface he's directly above. I have a couple gripes with the camera and platforming sections too. They got it pretty much down for the most part. It's not quite the free aim like all newer games have, but you can pan around Conker by holding down the left and right C buttons easy enough. And if you hold down the R button, you can get a zoomed in free aim if you need to look around. And I'm totally cool with this arrangement for a platform game like this. Some sections choose to switch things up though and have an automated or fixed camera to much more frustrating results. I like fixed cameras in some games, but they're not welcome here. The game goes from having the camera be dependent on Conker's movement and position to having Conker's movement and position be dependent on the camera. Let me demonstrate. The platforming section that had me pissing the most blood was this tower here. You're meant to jump along these battlements that are arranged in a circle. Had this section use a free aim camera, Conker would navigate it by tilting the control stick at sort of an inward angle along with the circle's edge. But since this part uses a fixed cam that's placed at the center of the circle, this section is meant to control more like a 2D platformer, and the player is just meant to hold right.
If you just held right here, he would fall down, and then sure he'd run into this little fucker, but let's say this guy's not here. He would go along the edge naturally. You just need to hold right. If he did this in free camera and he just happened to be facing this way, so maybe he'd fall down, but then he'd walk off the edge here, walk off, and fall down.
I can see how someone in 2001 might have picked up the signal after playing 2D games most of their life, or how the designers might have assumed they would, but the change isn't really communicated, and it's not like other 2.5D games where you're locked to 2D movement. Conker can still move inward and outward and fall right off. I'll admit that all of this frustration did something cool for me, and that's that it helped me relate with Conker a lot more throughout. This isn't some fun adventure for him, it's a fucking gauntlet of peril, and everyone's just an asshole to him. When he looks to camera and says, "Not more of this shit," I totally get that. With the smell of burnt ass fresh on my mind, yeah, cheers, brother. Overall, if there was ever cause not to play this game, it'd be its eagerness to thrust its players into unfamiliar control schemes and expect them to master them through repetitive trial and error. I don't doubt the amount of effort and care that went into making these controls as good as they are, but given the scarcity of game design and wisdom at the time of their making, I think it might have been better to stick with a smaller amount of core gameplay ideas and spend more time with those. I respect its ability to experiment, but I don't enjoy it. I'm going to talk about the ending now. If you don't want it spoiled, use the chapter feature on YouTube to skip this part. If you're watching this in the future and YouTube's removed it for whatever reason, consider this a message from them to go fuck yourself. After fricking around for like 8 hours, Conker jumps into the burning remains of a windmill and goes through a tunnel, which leads him into the final area of the game. Conker's given a job to rob a bank, and the game goes full Matrix parody here. This is actually my favorite shooting segment in the game, I think. The aiming still leaves a lot to be desired, but the section is easy enough that it isn't frustrating, and I think slow-mo Matrix diving is just an inherently satisfying thing to do. After shooting his way in, Conker makes it to the vault and earns $1 million. Then the Panther King appears and has Conker's GF, Barry, killed. Conker gets kinda sad about it, and then an alien bursts out of the Panther King's chest, and he dies. Turns out his little Nazi weasel was plotting against him and planted the alien in his body. Then he launches the room into orbit for some reason and tries to sick the alien on Conker. But Conker pulls a lever that opens the airlock, which sucks out the Nazi weasel, killing him too. Then Conker puts on an anti-gravity suit, and the final boss fight begins. Now, I had some trouble with this last fight. You're supposed to beat the tar out of this alien and throw him out into space 3 times. Should be easy enough, but this alien has 2 different attacks, a sweep and a bite, that you're supposed to respond to by jumping and guarding respectively. But there's no way to tell which attack it's going to do before it does it. You have nothing to react to but a few frames of animation, and the animations on Conker are so slow that you're bound to hit the wrong button and get mangled by this thing. I could be wrong, but I think you just have to get lucky at this part if you want to win. When you do, the cutscene right after has the alien inexplicably jumping back into the ship, and Conker pretty much resigns himself to death. As the alien goes for the kill though, time itself suddenly stops. The game is soft-locked, so Conker makes contact with the programmer and blackmails them over the error. In return for not telling their boss about the glitch, Conker gets whatever choice of weapon he wants and chooses a sword. Resuming time, Conker beheads the alien and has a brief celebration before realizing that he missed his chance to ask the programmer to resurrect his slain girlfriend. All the little asshole characters he met throughout the game enter and pressure him to take the Panther's spot as king. Conker doesn't really want to be king, but for some reason gives into their pressure.
So, there I am, king. King of all the land. And yep, I may be king. I have all the money in the world. And all the land. And all that stuff. But you know, I don't really think I want it. I just want to go home. With Barry. And, I don't know, have a bottle of beer. And you don't really know what it is you have until it's gone. Gone. Gone.
This ending comes out of left fucking field. When I saw the intro where he's king and he's doing the Clockwork Orange Pink Floyd thing, I expected it to be like a fake out. Like it'd end off with an erotic twist where he says something like, wait, I'm the king, I can do whatever I want. It just kind of throws the crown away. But no, this is it. The credits music is just howling wind and quiet strings. There's this feeling of pure emptiness. Why would they end such a ridiculous game with such a grim ending? My best interpretation of this ending is that it's meant to serve as an answer to all of the game's cynical humor. Up until this point, the depravity on display, especially that of Conker, is laughed about and essentially celebrated. While most characters in the game are assholes to Conker, he himself isn't great either. He's apathetic at best and is only willing to help people if he can get something out of them, especially money. He blows off his girlfriend at the beginning to drink with the guys, he lusts after other women, and the ending wouldn't have even happened the way it did if he didn't decide to rob the bank for all its cash, so it's somewhat his fault that things ended up this way. Based on his past actions, ending up as a king who's hopelessly alone is both the perfect reward and punishment for Conker, and it goes to show the player that indulging in these actions might be harmless fun at a game, but in reality they only lead to misery, and Conker serves as a good example. It's a bit contrived how he passively accepts becoming king, but tonally it works to have the imagery of him sitting on the throne with that sneering lip and dead-eyed stare. He has everything he's ever wanted, but he's lost everything that's ever mattered. Conker's Bad Fur Day can be a real fuck of a game, but its charm and its wit are simply intoxicating. To my knowledge, most of the people who worked on this game are still with Rare, working on Sea of Thieves in their upcoming game Everwild. But Mr. Chris Seaver, or Sever, the main visionary behind Conker, has gone indie for a little over a decade at this point, and has since produced a neat little game called The Unlikely Legend of Rusty Pup. It honestly looks pretty cool. I might check this one out in the future. And that's all I got. Tune in next time when I hopefully make a better video than this one.